Lieutenant Carter stepped off the transport bus, her boots striking the concrete with a sharp echo that seemed to ripple through the busy naval base. The morning sun glinted off rows of ships anchored at the pier, their steel hulls gleaming like silent sentinels. Around her, seasoned sailors hustled along the dock, shouting commands and maneuvering crates, their eyes flicking briefly toward her, some curious, some skeptical, and a few barely concealing their disdain. Adjusted her uniform with precise care, her posture perfect, but she remained unflinching under their scrutiny. Today was her first day as a recruit at one of the most prestigious naval installations in the United States, and she knew that first impressions mattered. She carried only a small duffel bag, yet her mind was already a library of calculations, strategies, and contingency plans. Every step she took was deliberate, every glance purposeful. Wasn't just a newcomer. She was observant, patient, and fiercely intelligent. She had trained for years at the academy, but the base was a living, breathing organism, complex, unforgiving, and brimming with social hierarchies that could swallow the unprepared. Her heart beat steadily, a rhythmic drum of determination. The group of senior recruits near the entrance eyed her with thinly veiled curiosity. "New girl, huh?" One of them muttered to the other, his smirk sharp as a knife. They nudged each other, sizing her up, expecting timidity or uncertainty. Caught the whispered challenge, the subtle threat behind the laughter, but she didn't react outwardly. Instead, she allowed a faint, confident smile to brush her lips, a smile that carried no arrogance, only the quiet assertion that she wasn't intimidated. As she walked toward the main training compound, a few cliques made small, deliberate obstacles in her path. A dropped bag here, a blocked doorway there. One recruit stepped in front of her and leaned in, attempting to unsettle her with a heavy stare. "Watch where you're going, rookie," he muttered, the words more menacing than necessary. Eyes met his, unflinching, calculating his movements and reading the subtle tension in his body. In one fluid motion, she, not in fear but in precision, letting his momentum carry him forward while she continued along her path as if nothing had occurred. The onlookers paused, a flicker of surprise in their expressions. Inside the training hall, the atmosphere was intense, metal clanging shouted instructions, the sharp scent of sweat and determination. Quietly surveyed the room, nodding routines, patterns, and the intricate dance of authority among the sailors. Each officer moved with purpose, each recruit competing for recognition. Filed every detail mentally, noting which individuals were likely allies, which were distractions, and which might present future obstacles. Even in her silence, she was actively engaging with her environment, learning, adapting, and anticipating. By the afternoon, had completed her first drills, basic navigation, physical exercises, and a series of introductory protocol tests. Though she hadn't sought confrontation, she had already caught the attention of a few instructors. Captain, a stern figure known for his uncompromising standards, observed her from across the hall. His posture, her calm yet focused demeanor, and her subtle ability to navigate obstacles without aggression all marked her as extraordinary. Her mind worked like a well-oiled engine, analyzing, predicting, and executing without hesitation. As the sun dipped low over the pier, paused for a moment outside, watching sailors return from exercises, their silhouettes sharp against the fading light. She allowed herself a quiet exhale, a moment of reflection. Today, she hadn't fought anyone directly, but she had made her presence known. The whispers, the subtle nods of respect, and the cautious glances told her one thing: this base underestimated her, and that would be their first mistake. His gaze drifted toward the horizon, where the waves kissed the hulls of battleships waiting for orders. She thought of the challenges ahead, the rigorous training, the rivalries, the expectations, but also of the opportunities. Somewhere in this vast, complex base, her journey toward leadership was beginning, and though no one there could yet foresee it, the quiet, unassuming recruit standing with unwavering poise carried the makings of the base's future admiral. The next morning, the base hummed with intensity, drills echoing across the open courtyard. Carter arrived early, her uniform crisp, her movements deliberate. She had barely stepped onto the obstacle course when a trio of recruits, bulkier, older, and confident, converged on her path. Their eyes glinted with mischief, and the corner of one man's mouth twitched in a knowing smirk. They whispered among themselves, their voices sharp with challenge. "You're new, rookie. Let's see what you've got," one sneered. His lips curved into a faint, unassuming smile, one that concealed the analytical storm beneath. She didn't react with anger or fear. Instead, she assessed weight distribution, stance, momentum, and vulnerabilities. Every subtle motion was catalogued in her mind, every glance memorized. The trio approached, shoving lightly at first, escalating their pressure to test her reflexes. Remained steady, breathing slow and controlled, her eyes never leaving the leader. The first push came, confident and forceful, allowed it to carry through, sidestepping with precision while simultaneously shifting her balance. The attacker stumbled forward, crashing into the others in a domino effect. A murmur ran through the crowd of recruits watching. Shock mixed with admiration flickered across faces. The instructors paused mid-step, eyebrows raising at her poise and tactical reaction. She hadn't fought with brute strength, but with calculated timing and strategy, a display more impressive than raw muscle. Undeterred, the second recruit attempted a flanking move, intending to corner her. Pivoted effortlessly, anticipating his trajectory and redirecting him away from the path, ensuring no one was injured. A third tried to circle behind, but her acute awareness and spatial perception made him hesitate. His movements were smooth, efficient, and controlled, leaving observers questioning whether they had underestimated her. The trio exchanged uneasy glances, realizing their intimidation had failed spectacularly. By the end of the exercise, had turned an aggressive confrontation into a subtle demonstration of leadership and control. She helped one of the tripping recruits to his feet with a nod, a quiet acknowledgement of skill rather than dominance. No words were exchanged, yet the message was clear. She was capable, confident, and composed under pressure. Her presence altered the atmosphere. The onlookers, initially skeptical, began to sense that she wasn't like other recruits. Captain observed quietly from the sidelines, his sharp eyes noting every detail. Calm assessment, ability to anticipate moves, and seamless execution were exactly the traits he sought in officers destined for higher command. He had seen plenty of recruits rely on sheer strength, aggression, or loud displays to assert themselves. Used none of that. Her mastery lay in strategy, composure, and foresight. He made a mental note. She was extraordinary. By mid-morning, word of her performance spread across the base. Small whispers reached other recruits. "Did you see how she handled those guys?" Some nodded in quiet respect, while a few who had once mocked her now reconsidered their assumptions. Didn't seek recognition, yet her quiet confidence commanded attention. She moved through the rest of the drills with the same focused precision, nodding patterns, correcting minor errors, and guiding herself through routines with unwavering discipline. When the day ended, paused outside the obstacle course, watching the sun glitter on the base's docks. The trio who had challenged her lingered, glancing over with a mix of frustration and reluctant admiration. Met their gaze briefly and nodded, a silent acknowledgement, neither boastful nor patronizing. She had proven herself without raising her voice, without unnecessary confrontation. The base hadn't yet realized it, but its quiet brilliance was beginning to shift the balance of respect and authority among recruits and instructors alike. As she walked back to the barracks, allowed herself a faint, private smile. Today had been a test, a subtle proving ground. She had not only defended herself but also demonstrated something far more significant. Intellect, composure, and strategy could overcome intimidation and force. And somewhere in the shadows of the base, Captain was already anticipating the day she would lead with authority far beyond her years. Days passed, and the base became Carter's proving ground. The initial whispers of respect had grown into cautious acknowledgement, but challenges still awaited. During a team exercise on the training field, she was paired with physically stronger recruits, some taller, bulkier, and confident in their ability to intimidate. Their first instinct was to dominate her, assuming she would struggle under their pressure. However, remained calm, observing their approach, their timing, and the subtle cues in their movement. Every step, every gesture was meticulously noted in her mind. The drill commenced, and the heavier recruits attempted to force her into submission, using brute strength rather than strategy. Didn't resist blindly. Instead, she anticipated their shifts in balance, redirecting force in subtle ways. One misstep, one calculated sidestep, and the momentum of their push sent a teammate stumbling harmlessly forward, eliciting surprised gasps from observers. Focus never wavered. She moved with precision and intent, demonstrating control in a situation that could have quickly devolved into chaos. Her instructors watched with growing admiration. Lieutenant Daniels, an officer known for his blunt evaluations, shook his head slightly in disbelief. "Most recruits fight with brute force," he muttered. "She's doing something far more impressive." Tactics weren't about intimidation. They were about observation, prediction, and execution. She transformed a potentially aggressive scenario into a demonstration of intelligence, skill, and composure. A lesson in how true leadership often worked quietly, behind the scenes. Throughout the drill, also assisted other recruits. When a peer struggled to maintain balance during a particularly challenging maneuver, she stepped forward, offering guidance without undermining authority. She corrected posture, suggested minor adjustments, and allowed the trainee to succeed through their own efforts rather than taking over. Observers began to notice a pattern. Wasn't just surviving the exercises. She was elevating those around her, turning weakness into capability with patience and quiet direction. Even the antagonistic recruits who had previously tried to overpower her began to rethink their assumptions. One approached her after the drill, offering a curt nod of acknowledgement. You handled that well," he admitted, reluctant respect in his voice. Gave a simple nod in return, no words needed. Her reputation for calm authority and strategic skill was beginning to ripple through the base, reaching ears that had once dismissed her as another rookie. Captain continued to monitor her, impressed not only by her physical skill but by her instinctive leadership. His ability to assess threats, anticipate outcomes, and act decisively was a rare combination, one he rarely saw in new recruits. He noted her humility and patience, qualities that complemented her strength and intelligence. This blend marked her as someone capable of far more than routine assignments, a future officer whose presence would command respect naturally, not forcibly. By the end of the day, had her standing among recruits. Skepticism gave way to cautious admiration, and even those who had mocked her now observed in silent curiosity. Her consistent performance, tactical intelligence, and subtle mentorship created an aura of quiet authority. Moved through the barracks and training grounds with poise, fully aware of the influence she had begun to exert without needing to assert it overtly. That evening, as she cleaned her gear and reflected on the day, allowed herself a brief smile. Each challenge, each test had taught her something new, not just about tactics or strength, but about human behavior, leadership, and respect. The base might have underestimated her initially, but had quietly reshaped perceptions. She was more than a recruit. She was a strategist, a mentor, and a force to be reckoned with. And somewhere in the shadows, her future as a leader. One day, an admiral was quietly taking shape. Weeks passed, and Carter's reputation at the base was steadily growing. No longer just the new recruit, she had become a quiet force among her peers. Today, she arrived early for drills, the crisp morning air biting at her cheeks, the sound of marching boots echoing across the compound. Her mind was already working, analyzing the day's schedule, noting patterns in the instructor's routines, and identifying potential pitfalls for herself and her fellow recruits. Understood the stakes. Every decision, every move could influence not only her success, but the perception of her leadership potential. The first exercise was physical, a complex obstacle course designed to test strength, balance, and agility. As expected, a few of the more senior recruits tried to assert dominance, hopping to intimidate her once again. Moved through the obstacles with measured precision, focusing on efficiency rather than speed alone. Where others relied on brute force, she relied on technique, anticipation, and spatial awareness. When a teammate faltered on a high beam, instinctively reached out, steadying him without drawing attention. The crowd watched, some amazed, some reluctantly impressed. But it wasn't only physical skill that set her apart. During the tactical drills that followed, demonstrated an uncanny ability to predict the movements of her opponents and allies alike. A simulated emergency scenario tested decision-making under pressure. A mock fire had broken out in the training facility, requiring recruits to navigate hazards while coordinating rescue efforts. While some panicked or acted impulsively, remained calm, delegating tasks to teammates and ensuring that everyone completed the drill efficiently. Her instructors, observing quietly, exchanged approving nods. Captain made particular note of her poise, strategy, and leadership instincts, recognizing qualities that far surpassed her rank. Between drills, quietly mentored a few struggling recruits, offering subtle guidance that allowed them to succeed without overshadowing their efforts. She explained small adjustments in stance, technique, and timing, never condescending, never boasting. Slowly, peers who had once ignored her began to seek her advice. Even those who had tried to intimidate her months before were forced to acknowledge her skill. Whispers spread. She's more than a rookie, she knows what she's doing. Remained humble, letting her actions speak louder than any words. Later in the afternoon, a particularly challenging navigation exercise required recruits to chart a course through an unfamiliar segment of the base while following strict protocols. His mind worked methodically, calculating angles, timing, and contingencies. She completed the task flawlessly while assisting a teammate struggling with the compass. By the end of the exercise, senior officers had taken note. "Lieutenant Carter," Captain remarked, his tone reserved but firm, "your performance today reflects not just skill but leadership potential. Continue on this path and you will go far." Simply nodded, internally absorbing the praise without letting it affect her composure. By day's end, his influence had quietly shifted the culture among her peers. Respect replaced doubt, admiration replaced skepticism. She had proven that intelligence, discipline, and composure could command attention far more effectively than aggression. Even recruits who had doubted her now mirrored her patience and focus, realizing that leadership was not about dominance but example. As she walked toward the barracks, allowed herself a moment to reflect. Every observation, every calculation, every subtle guidance she offered to others was a building block in her development. She understood that recognition, once earned, carried responsibility. Today, she had begun to shape the base, not through intimidation or force, but through quiet authority, competence, and integrity. The seed of leadership had taken root, signaling the path to something far greater. Somewhere in the corridors of power, her potential as a future admiral was quietly being forged. The sun had barely risen when Carter stepped onto the training grounds, the crisp morning air tinged with anticipation. Whispers followed her steps, some admiring, some wary. She knew that her growing reputation had unsettled certain recruits, particularly a small group who had repeatedly tried to intimidate her. Today, they seemed determined to escalate their efforts. Didn't flinch. She had faced physical and mental challenges before, and this was simply another test, a calculated trial in a series that would ultimately define her leadership. The group of antagonistic recruits cornered her near the obstacle course. Their smirks were more pronounced, their jabs sharper. "You think you're special, rookie?" One sneered, stepping closer, his shadow looming. Another chuckled darkly, "Let's see how long that confidence lasts." Eyes, calm and unyielding, assessed the situation in an instant. She noted their stance, the subtle tension in their muscles, and the trajectory of their movements. Each motion became a clue, every shift in balance a potential leverage point. The first shove came, heavy and sudden. As training kicked in, she didn't resist blindly but redirected the force, using it to unbalance her aggressor without harming him. A second attempt followed, a flanking move designed to catch her off guard. She pivoted with seamless precision, stepping aside and guiding him past her with a subtle shift of weight. Onlookers paused, realizing that what they had assumed would be a display of submission had instead become a lesson in controlled power and strategic thinking. The leader of the group, frustrated, lunged forward, attempting to corner her against a wall. Anticipated the move, pivoting with such fluidity that he stumbled forward, losing momentum entirely. Murmurs rippled through the surrounding recruits, some astonishment, some begrudging respect. Captain, watching discreetly from the sidelines, raised an eyebrow, impressed by her ability to turn confrontation into controlled instruction. Wasn't fighting for pride or dominance. She was demonstrating mastery and calm authority, showing that intellect could surpass brute force. By the end of the skirmish, the group had retreated, humbled yet silently acknowledging her skill. Offered no gloating smile, only a brief, composed nod. Her subtle handling of the situation sent a message far clearer than any boast. Respect is earned through competence, composure, and strategic action, not intimidation. The surrounding recruits absorbed the lesson quickly. Even those who had doubted her now treated her with a mixture of awe and caution. After the confrontation, continued her drills with measured focus, as if nothing had occurred. She guided struggling teammates through challenging maneuvers, reinforcing lessons of precision and patience. Word of her handling of the antagonists spread rapidly throughout the base. By mid-afternoon, whispers of her capability had reached corners she hadn't yet visited, creating an atmosphere of cautious respect. Those who had once mocked her were now observers, realizing that she was shaping the social dynamics of the base without overt assertion. Captain called her aside later in the day. "Lieutenant Carter," he said, his voice low but firm, "you've demonstrated skill, intelligence, and authority today. That's rare in a recruit. Your ability to handle opposition calmly, without arrogance or aggression, marks you as someone destined for leadership. Keep this trajectory, and your influence will extend far beyond the training grounds." Nodded silently, absorbing the praise with quiet humility. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, walked toward the barracks, reflecting on the day's events. Every confrontation, every challenge, every small act of guidance had reinforced her understanding. Leadership isn't about winning fights. It's about earning trust, demonstrating competence, and commanding respect through action and example. She had faced opposition directly, yet emerged not only unscathed but elevated in authority. Somewhere in the shadows of the base, her reputation as a leader in the making was solidifying, marking the next step toward the future admiral she was destined to become. Captain had been observing Carter for weeks, quietly noting her composure, intelligence, and the respect she commanded without overt authority. Today, he called her to his office, a small but meticulously organized room overlooking the base. The walls were lined with maps, charts, and framed photographs of naval operations, a testament to decades of experience and hard-earned wisdom. Entered, standing at attention, her expression calm, yet beneath it simmered quiet anticipation. She understood that mentorship at this level was a rare opportunity, one that could shape her entire career. "Lieutenant Carter," began, his tone firm but not unkind, "I've been observing your progress. You handle challenges well, both physical and social, but leadership is more than skill or courage. It's about foresight, strategy, and guiding those around you effectively. I want to work with you directly." Nodded, absorbing the significance of the moment. This was more than recognition. It was a chance to learn from someone who had navigated the complexities of command at the highest levels. The mentorship began immediately, with Captain introducing her to advanced tactical exercises. Studied maps, practiced navigation drills, and simulated strategic maneuvers that required anticipating multiple variables at once. Unlike standard training, these exercises weren't just about following instructions. They demanded initiative, creativity, and a deep understanding of both human behavior and operational strategy. His analytical mind thrived in this environment. She observed, calculated, and executed, often anticipating outcomes before her mentor even suggested them. During one particularly challenging drill, simulated a surprise attack on a naval convoy. Recruits were tasked with defending the vessels, coordinating movements, and making split-second decisions under pressure. Immediately identified weaknesses in the opposing forces, reorganized her team, and implemented a counter-strategy that neutralized the threat efficiently. Impressed, allowed her to lead the next iteration entirely on her own. By the exercise's conclusion, the simulated enemy had been outmaneuvered entirely by her planning and foresight. But it wasn't only tactical skill that sought to cultivate. He emphasized leadership philosophy, empathy, integrity, and the ability to inspire others. Absorbed lessons in mentoring peers, managing conflict, and fostering loyalty without fear. She practiced decision-making that balanced authority with compassion, realizing that true leaders earn devotion through competence and fairness, not intimidation. Her ability to influence others subtly but effectively began to flourish, extending beyond drills and simulations into daily interactions with her peers. Also tested her resilience, presenting moral dilemmas and unexpected complications designed to stress her judgment. Responded with a combination of caution and decisiveness, weighing risks while maintaining focus on mission objectives. Her calm demeanor and ability to adapt under pressure left quietly impressed. "You have the instincts of someone who will rise far," he said one evening, reviewing the day's exercises. "But instincts alone aren't enough. You're developing the discipline, patience, and strategic mind that will define true leadership." Over weeks of mentorship's influence grew. Peers noticed her calm confidence, her ability to guide without domineering, and her knack for anticipating challenges before they became problems. Her quiet authority became a stabilizing force in the base. Didn't seek recognition, yet her reputation spread organically, as if her competence had its own gravity. The foundation for her future as a leader, one day, an admiral, was being forged meticulously, with every challenge, every lesson, and every act of guidance strengthening her resolve and sharpening her intellect. By the end of one long day, stood on the training deck, gazing at the ships glinting in the late afternoon sun. The mentorship had illuminated a path she hadn't yet fully walked, but the direction was clear. She understood the responsibilities of leadership, strategy, empathy, foresight, and felt ready to embrace them. Somewhere in the quiet corridors of the base, her future as an exceptional officer was taking shape, quietly, steadily, and with undeniable promise. The morning sun rose over the base, painting the ships in shades of gold and steel. Carter arrived at the pier with the precision and poise that had become her signature. Today was no ordinary drill. She had been assigned to lead a high-stakes naval exercise, a simulated mission that tested strategy, teamwork, and leadership under pressure. Her small team faced a superior opposing force, requiring not just strength but sharp decision-making, coordination, and flawless execution. His mind was already running through contingencies, anticipating every move and calculating outcomes before her peers even spoke. As the exercise commenced, the opposing team struck with aggressive tactics, hoping to overwhelm her squad. Stayed calm, issuing concise, clear instructions while monitoring both her team and the opposition. She repositioned members efficiently, taking advantage of terrain, angles, and timing, ensuring that each movement minimized risk while maximizing impact. The recruits under her command followed her guidance with focus, trusting her judgment implicitly. Even in tense moments when the simulation appeared to favor the enemy, remained composed, analyzing, adapting, and executing with a deft combination of strategy and intuition. Midway through the operation, a simulated breach threatened to compromise their position. While others panicked or acted impulsively, took a step back, assessing the situation. She identified an overlooked weak point in the opposing force's formation and redirected her team to exploit it. Within minutes, the tide turned, her team gaining the upper hand and ultimately securing the simulated objective flawlessly. Observers, including captain and other senior officers, exchanged impressed glances. His quiet, tactical brilliance had transformed a potentially disastrous scenario into a textbook example of leadership in action. After the exercise, senior officers convened to review performance. His name was highlighted repeatedly for her foresight, decisive action, and ability to inspire confidence in her team. The recognition went beyond mere praise. Recommendations for advanced leadership programs and specialized assignments followed swiftly. Peers who had once doubted or tried to challenge her now sought her guidance, eager to understand her approach to strategy, composure, and mentorship. However, remained grounded, viewing the accolades as milestones rather than the destination. She understood that recognition came with responsibility, and true leadership required humility as much as skill. In the barracks later that evening, quietly reviewed the day's events with her team. She discussed strategy, highlighting decisions and explaining reasoning without asserting superiority. Her mentorship was subtle yet effective, turning successful recruits into even stronger collaborators. Through these discussions, she nurtured teamwork, morale, and critical thinking. Observers took note. Wasn't just excelling individually, she elevated those around her. Her ability to combine tactical mastery with emotional intelligence marked her as someone destined for greater leadership. Captain, observing her development, finally addressed privately. "Lieutenant Carter," he said, voice low and serious, "your performance today demonstrates what I've suspected for weeks. You're ready for responsibility far beyond your rank. You have the talent, discipline, and judgment to take on complex operations and lead others effectively. If you continue along this path, your career will be remarkable." Nodded, absorbing the words with quiet determination. Recognition was gratifying, but her focus remained firmly on preparation, growth, and leadership. By sunset, stood on the pier, gazing at the ships lined like sentinels along the harbor. The day had tested her limits, yet she had not only met them but surpassed expectations. Her journey from underestimated recruit to recognized leader was solidifying. The base had witnessed her intellect, composure, and strategic brilliance, and whispers of her potential reached officers and recruits alike. Opportunities were now within reach, and understood that her path toward leadership, and eventually the Admiralty, was clearer than ever. As the golden light reflected off the water, allowed herself a rare smile. Recognition and opportunity had arrived, but she knew the true measure of her journey lay ahead, in every decision, every challenge, and every act of quiet, undeniable leadership. She was ready. The late afternoon sun bathed the naval base in warm, golden light as Carter stood on the deck, gazing at the horizon. Ships rocked gently in the harbor, their steel hulls gleaming like silent witnesses to decades of service and sacrifice. The events of the past months, the tests, the confrontations, the subtle battles for respect, floated through her mind. She had arrived as a new recruit, underestimated by most, challenged by a few, and observed skeptically by her superiors. Now she was recognized not only for her skill but for the calm authority and strategic brilliance she exuded naturally. The base was alive with activity, sailors moving in practiced rhythm, officers issuing precise orders, and recruits navigating the demanding routines that shaped the Navy's future. His presence had changed the atmosphere. Where once whispers had mocked her, now they carried respect, admiration, and cautious awe. Peers approached her for advice, guidance, and insight, seeking the clarity that came from her calm, analytical mind. Even those who had tried to intimidate her now deferred subtly, recognizing that her influence was rooted in intellect and integrity rather than aggression. Captain approached quietly, pausing beside her. He said, his voice firm but warm, "You've grown in ways few recruits do, not just in skill but in leadership, strategy, and character. You've earned respect here, and your influence will extend far beyond this base. The Navy will be fortunate to have you guiding its future." Nodded, her mind already processing the implications. Recognition was valuable, but it was responsibility and foresight that truly mattered. Leadership wasn't about accolades. It was about vision, discipline, and the ability to inspire others to rise to their potential. She turned her gaze back to the horizon, reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. Every shove, every challenge, every tense drill had been a lesson in composure, strategy, and influence. The antagonists she had faced early on had become lessons in resilience, teaching her that true authority is earned, not demanded. Every act of mentorship, every quiet intervention, had strengthened her ability to lead not through intimidation, but through example, intelligence, and integrity. Thoughts drifted to the future. She envisioned herself commanding not just a team or even a fleet, but shaping the course of naval operations at a national level. The path ahead was long, demanding, and fraught with challenges that she could not yet fully foresee. Yet, the skills she had honed, strategic thinking, calm authority, mentorship, and unyielding composure, would guide her. Each decision she made, each challenge she overcame, was building toward a future few could imagine. Carter, an admiral whose influence would ripple across the Navy, inspiring generations to come. As dusk deepened, the base lights shimmered on the water, reflecting in thoughtful eyes. She realized that leadership was more than rank or recognition. It was a mindset, a series of choices guided by responsibility, ethics, and vision. She had learned to face opposition without fear, guide others without dominance, and make decisions with clarity even under pressure. These qualities were the foundation upon which she would build her career and ultimately her legacy. A group of recruits passed by, pausing to salute her. She returned the gesture not with superiority but with quiet acknowledgement. Respect had been earned and influence established. Understood that her journey was far from over. Every exercise, every challenge, and every interaction was shaping the leader she was destined to become. The future admiral was already emerging, not with fanfare or boastful display, but with quiet authority, strategic brilliance, and unwavering resolve. Standing there, watching the horizon bleed into twilight, Carter allowed herself a small, private smile. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: she was ready. Her journey from underestimated recruit to recognized leader had only just begun, and the Navy and the world would one day feel the impact of her leadership. She was poised, capable, and unstoppable. The future was hers to shape.